it off for our community gathering after the service. And now let us turn our minds and hearts to our musical prelude.
Morning. On the spirit with the spirit of a wholeness today, I'm playing a arrangement of "There Is a Balm in Gilead," an African American spiritual arranged by UU composer Cliff Hardin. Just a few of the words: "There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul."
Thank you, Barbara. Beautiful rendition, Barbara. Summit UU Fellowship is a spiritual community deeply committed to the shared values of love and inclusion. We have no specific Unitarian dogma. However, we do aspire to the principles and purposes listed at the end of your order of service. The mission of Summit is to commit ourselves to building a more compassionate, just, and sustainable world. We do acknowledge that the land upon which we reside is unceded and part of the long legacy of the Kumeyaay people. The spiritual traditions and enduring sovereignty of the Kumeyaay are the first that we acknowledge from this land. We also aspire to act upon our UU principles and traditions of peace and justice as we honor the continuing presence of the Kumeyaay Nation. And now Reverend Jennifer will come up and do the chalice lighting reading, and I will light the chalice.
May the light of this chalice give light and warmth to our community when we are joyful and when we despair. And may we feel the warmth spread from our circle to wider and wider circles. Until we all know they belong to one circle of life.
Thank you, Ren. Well, I couldn't see that, so I admit it. Okay, now, we are going to do our UU hymn and aspiration, and we'll begin with our Spanish version. First, if you want to rise and join us, should be on the screen. May love be the spirit of this fellowship, and the quest for truth be its sacrament, and service be its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. Now we have a hymn with Laurel and Pierre coming up. Oh, I'm sorry, am I out of sync here? All right, that was my bad. Okay. We have a reading instead. Please be seated.
This is a responsive reading, and after each phrase that I say, your response is, "We are the earth." Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, brown earth. We are the earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people, and all people are you. We are earth. Remember you are this universe, and this universe is you. We are earth. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. We are earth. Remember, language comes from this. Remember, the dance language is, that life is. Remember, we are Earth.
And now our super spitty religious director, Mary, will be coming up the ramp in her new gig there. She's doing quite well, isn't she?
I almost took a chair out. Sorry about
Yeah.
that. Last week it was a chalice. This week was a chair. Hi. Good morning. I am here to talk to you about vulnerability again. So vulnerability and asking for help. Is it easy to ask for help? No, it's not. Lynn, Sometimes. Lynn just modeled it beautifully with the chalice lighting, didn't she? She asked for some help and modeled it beautifully. So, I was thinking this morning about what I was going to say to you, and it was exactly 3 years ago today that I was sitting at my desk and I got an email from the Unitarian Universalist Association saying that we needed to not meet in groups of 25 or more. And I was sitting there by myself at my desk. Reverend Frank was on vacation. I was helping Katie Boskoff to plan the service for the coming Sunday. It was a Thursday. And I was like, what do you mean we can't have a service? What do you mean? I don't know what to do, In fact, Reverend Frank, I emailed him that morning, and he was on a plane coming back from Mexico. So I couldn't even talk to him. So I was trying to figure out what to do. And it was a very scary moment, and I knew I needed some help. And so I thought, okay, this is a digital world. I know how to use Zoom. I know that YouTube's available. I know how to pick up my phone and make a quick video. And so I reached out to Trish Ladd, who I knew how to use some of this stuff, and I knew how to use some, and we worked together and we figured it out, how to send a video out to everybody and say, it's not the end of the world. We can do this for a couple weeks. Right? And that started a whole chain of events that we all pitched in and everybody figured it out. We all had to ask for help. And we all had to work together to figure things out, right? And everybody has had to do a little bit of something, right? And now I'm needing some help as I'm figuring out how to get my body working again. My surgery is scheduled for April 3rd, and it is a go. I got the full go from the doctor last week, so just so y'all know. But I want to give you a little secret. Religious educators have to ask for help all the time. The work that I do involves asking for a lot of volunteering and a lot of work. I'm going to take this off so you can see my lips. I just realized I still have this on. I'm masking because, like I said, I have surgery coming up, and I do not want to get sick. So it requires a lot of asking for help and volunteering, right? And especially with me going to be gone for most of the month of April, I've been asking our families for a lot of help to fill in those days so our children can still enjoy their time here and have the adventures that they need to have and be able to be in this community, even with me being gone. Because even though there's only one Mary, there's a whole summit, I'm not the only one. There's a whole amazing community here, right? And we can all help each other. So one of the mantras that I learned from one of my colleagues who, her name is Emmelinda McLean, one of the first people I met 12 years ago when I first, 11 years ago when I first started doing this work. We were talking about the work that we do as religious educators and how we have to have a lot of kind of trust and just like sometimes you don't know if it's going to go okay, right? Have you ever felt that kind of nervous and excited about something? You just don't know if it's going to work out? Just not quite sure? So we came up with this mantra. I'm so excited. Have you ever been excited about something's going to happen? Like, yeah, I'm excited, but I'm kind of like excited. Like I'm excited, not sure. And you think it's going to be great, but you're not sure. It's going to be great. And you have faith that it's going to be great. Now, I know faith's a complicated word in Unitarian Universalist spaces, right? Faith's complicated. When I think of faith, though, to me, faith is the love that community has when we're together at our best. You know? To me, faith in my heart is love. And we put this to a body prayer. Do you know what a body prayer is? It's when you move your body to something. So I'm going to teach you this body prayer, and I hope you'll use it when you're feeling nervous and excited about asking for help. Okay? So it goes like this. See if I can remember it. I'm so excited. Let's see it. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. Or it's going to be great up here. We go here again. It's going to be great. And then I have faith. Let's try it a little bit differently. I'm so excited. I'm going to go out here. It's going to be great. I have faith. So Mary's going to have surgery. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. I have faith. All right? All right? So anytime. So I'm going to be gone for a month, but you guys got this, right? All right? So I'm so excited. It's going to be great. I have faith. Okay? And I'll be back. And when I come back, the month of May is going to be creativity. And you can bet we're going to play a lot during creativity, right?
I'm so excited.
Yes, that's what I want to hear. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. And we have faith? All right, that's what we want to hear. Let's do it one more time. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. I have faith. So that is a vulnerability to ask for help. But when you lean into help as an opportunity for love, an opportunity to offer and to share and to bless each other, then it really is an opportunity for growth. And yeah, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the way you would do it. And that's okay, right? That's okay. So that's my story for you today. And thank you for listening. And thank you for playing with me and being excited and having faith. So let's do our affirmation. Ready? We are Unitarian Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. All right, now if anybody wants to come back and play, we're heading back to the classrooms, and I will be hopefully not knocking any chairs out or taking out a chalice on my way. Still learn how to use this thing.
Thank you, Mary. So now we'll have our song, and Pierre and Laura will be leading us. Oh, sure.
Oh, remember, this is a hymn, so you guys sing along, okay?
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning
Hello. It's so wonderful to see you all this morning. And it's wonderful to be here. I realized on my way here that while I've given a few sermons during the last 3 years, this is the first time I've given one in person. And so, thank you. So like Mary, I'm expressing some of my own vulnerability that I might be a little bit rusty. I've gotten so used to doing everything through a flat screen, and now I'm wondering, what am I supposed to do with my hands, and who am I supposed to look at?
Welcome to Summit.
So I think it's going to be a help to me to do a bit of guided meditation before getting into the sermon this morning, and I invite you to join me. If you're comfortable, please close your eyes. And take a deep breath in and out. And as you breathe, I invite you to bring your attention into your body. Feel what's going on in your body where you sit. And with your next breath, I invite you to let your attention descend down through your feet, down into the ground, and into the earth below us. And to imagine what is in that earth, the cool, moist soil, the rocks, the life, the earthworms, the insects burrowing, the seeds waiting for one day when they might open. And take another breath in and out. Now bring your attention back up to surface level. And let your attention expand outward from our bodies to our left and our right, to our front and our back. Let our attention expand so that it creates a big circle that includes the other people, the other living beings and creatures in this room with us. It expands to include the trees, the flowers, the shrubs, the squirrels, the critters, the bugs, the birds, to the left, to the right, to the front, to the back of us. And then with another breath in and out, let your attention return to your body. And then with one final breath, you can open your eyes and let your attention return to what you see, what you hear, and what we feel together in this room. This morning, I feel a bit like a prodigal son. 7 years ago, I served as a minister in a UU congregation. I was the assistant minister at First Church out in Hillcrest, and some of you even were my congregants or saw me preach there. But since then, for the past 7 years, I've been working in the nonprofit sector. I've been working for an activist organization that's trying to create a more compassionate food system. And since I accepted this invitation to speak with you, I've been reflecting on the differences between my ministry then and my ministry now. The differences between churches and nonprofits, the differences between religion and activism. In some ways, I'm still doing the same work. I was a social justice minister, and the issues that I worked on at First Church and in my previous congregation, many of these were the same issues that I work on in my activism. They were about addressing the problems of our world, and particularly those problems that have been created by human greed and human power. But religion and activism put emphasis on different ways to solve these problems. I'm going to oversimplify this difference, but I see it as religion emphasizing the power of spiritual and moral values to achieve personal transformation, whereas activism emphasizes the power of political actions in the world to achieve structural change. Another way to put this is that religion emphasizes the sacred. There's a leaning in religious life that tells me you should be tending to the matters of the heart, the spirit, and tending to matters of building community. Whereas in activism, we deal with the realm of the profane. There's a leaning that tells me there that you should be tending to building political power, growing social influence, and having countable, pragmatic impact. When I was a social justice minister in churches, I was someone who pushed back against the sacred leaning of churches. I tended to be someone who in my sermons and in the groups that I led reminded people often that it's not enough just to explore what's going on in our heart and develop community around our values for social justice. We need to turn those values into action that have an impact in the world. So it's ironic that now that I spend my days working in activism, I find myself regularly pushing back in the other direction. I'm surrounded by pressures in my professional life to achieve results that can be counted. But meanwhile, my intuition tells me that all of these efforts that we make to create better food policies, to enact better regulations, to educate people so that they can become more responsible consumers, my intuition tells me that these efforts have no real chance of succeeding in creating a just food system unless they're accompanied by spiritual and moral awakenings. And awakenings on a scale that historically only religion has been able to bring about. And in particular, the idea that I believe we need to awaken to most in order to solve the problems of our world is that expressed by the seventh principle of Unitarian Universalism. The reality of the interdependent web of all life of which we are a part. I won't spend a lot of time defending the idea that all life is interconnected, or that what I am is not wholly contained by my body or by my mind, but that I am intimately inter-existent with others. I think many of us already know this to be true on some level. The evidence of our interconnection abounds in our sensed experience of the world. In fact, I believe the more difficult idea to defend is the one that's become dominant in modern industrial society. And that is the idea that the self is an atomized, independent entity, completely distinct from that which we call others, other people, other animals, or nature. This idea of the individual self is reinforced every day, all the time, by stories about individualism and stories about hierarchy that our society feeds us. And these stories are then used to justify the exploitation of others that is permeated throughout our society, our economy, and our food system. on the basis of other beings being different or lesser from ourselves. This imaginary barrier separating myself from others, it's what gives someone like me the privilege to purchase a piece of beef or chicken at the supermarket wrapped in plastic, and the privilege of not feeling an emotional or moral relationship to where that food came from, to the being whose body it once was. This imagined barrier is what gives someone like me the privilege to participate in an economy where I buy things with a click of a button on the internet without thinking about the growing gap between rich and poor, without feeling an emotional or moral relationship to all of the people, most of whom are not white, most of whom don't live where I live, who are on the losing end of each of these transactions. But this is a costly privilege. It's costly, of course, to the humans and animals who are being exploited and whose exploitation is made more tolerable, more comfortable by our emotional disconnection. But it's also costly to me. It's costly to my own integrity. And by integrity, I mean wholeness. Because if what I actually am is not separate, is in fact intertwined, interdependent, interexistent with all life, then the only way for me to cut myself off emotionally and morally from those who are on the other end of all these transactions is by making myself less whole. And that's why I'm on a personal quest to awaken myself to the simple but difficult realization of my interdependence. It's because I, a being with inherent worth and dignity, wish to be whole. And it's also because I really believe that the only chance that we have to not just mitigate the suffering in our world caused by how humans live, but to become a society that actually values all life, will be if there are enough people who have become awake and whole. But how do we go from an idea that most of us agree with already in theory, that we are interdependent, and turn it into something that we feel in our hearts, and turn it into something that we naturally, reflexively live through our bodies and our actions? And how do we do that, especially when everything in society pressures us all the time to deny this obvious truth? There's a word in religion for when we try to produce awakenings that lead to profound changes in how people live. Mary said that using the word faith in service might be a bit complicated for us use, so I apologize that I'm going to complicate things even further, and I'm going to use the word conversion. Conversion has not typically been a good word for Unitarian Universalists. I realize that, but I think it's time for us to reclaim it. And that's because my time in activism has taught me that simply educating people about the harms that our society causes to nature, to animals, to each other, rarely leads to the kind of lasting change in our behavior that's going to make a difference. The change needs to go deeper than just understanding. And so, I ask you, does this idea that we can change our relationship to our world by generating mass awakenings in other people, and the idea that these mass awakenings could result in a kind of mass conversion in how people behave, does this idea feel impossible? Does it feel idealistic and far-fetched? It's certainly not the kind of thing that I say out loud to my coworkers and colleagues in activism. It's certainly something that I used to dismiss as being kind of far-fetched. But I'm starting to come around. And so today I'm going to share with you two stories about why I believe this kind of change really is possible. The first story is an example of a mass awakening that I've seen take place in the world recently. And the second is my personal story of my own awakening and partial conversion to the kind of human I hope to be. So here's the first story. So I mentioned feeling like a prodigal son. One of my fears when I preach at a UU congregation these days is that afterwards somebody's going to ask me, so where do you go to church? And the embarrassing but true answer is that for the past few years, my church has not been any UU congregation. Instead, I have been getting a lot of my spiritual exploration and meaning through praying at the altar of one of the most profane of idols that our consumerist society has been able to produce. And I'm speaking of K-pop idols. Does that ring a bell for any of you? And particularly the music group BTS. Now, I'm going to pause because I realize that was a very jarring tonal shift, and it's going to require some context. So BTS is a music group. They are a Korean music group with 7 members, and they've been performing for about 10 years. And the thing to know about them is that they're one of the most commercially successful music groups in the world ever. And if you have heard about them, it may be because they're in the news a lot because of their massive, multicultural, and very active fan base, which calls itself ARMY. ARMY and this fan movement is often compared to Beatlemania. But imagine Beatlemania spreading across the world with the speed of social media and Google Translate. Also, like Beatlemania was in its early years, BTS's popularity often gets dismissed as being just about the fanaticism of teenage girls swooning over handsome musicians. But among their fans, they're actually known for having lyrics and messages that are unusually deep and emotionally resonant. And in particular, most of their discography deals with the topic of self-love. So in 2016, the leader of the group, who goes by the name RM, wrote a song that he ends by repeating the lyrics, "I wish I could love myself," 8 times in a row, like a kind of mantra. The next year, the group released an album called Love Yourself, Her, and then 2 more albums the following year, Love Yourself, Tear, and Love Yourself, Answer, with more than 30 songs, all of them building on the same message. And that message is that each of us is worthy of love. And not because we earn love from others by what we do, but because we are inherently lovable. If that feels like a familiar message, it might be because it's actually the first principle of Unitarian Universalism. Everyone, ourselves included, has inherent worth and dignity. This is one of those simple ideas that most of us agree with in our heads, but that's actually really difficult to believe in our hearts and to carry out in our actions. In interviews, the leader of BTS repeatedly said that loving himself was a journey that he was on, but it was not something he had yet achieved. And so the group did 2 world tours, singing to audiences of tens of thousands of people in each stadium they sang in, many of whom had memorized every word to every song and sang them back to them. During their second year of touring, they held a concert in London, and the fans had prepared a surprise for the band. During the show, the music suddenly stopped. Lyrics to their songs appeared on the screen, and all 20,000 of the fans in the audience sang their song back to them. There's numerous videos of the event. in which you can see the members of the group becoming emotionally affected. And a few months later, one of the band members, Jimin, released a song he wrote called Promise, which he described as a promise he made to himself in that moment on that stage. And it was to stop harming himself through negative self-talk, to stop doing things that hurt his body and his emotions in order to win other people's approval. He said that even though the song's message was for himself, he wanted to share it with others so that they could keep him accountable. And what struck me was that it took years of this group touring the world, singing to hundreds and thousands of people, and then to have 20,000 of those people sing their own words back to them for a simple idea, an idea they already believed in their heads, the idea of our own inherent worth, to sink into the musician's heart and become action. It was an awakening. And I'm sure he was not the only person in that stadium or amongst the millions who have watched their videos who had some kind of awakening to the reality of their self-worth. The song that Jimin released on a popular music app for free has gone on to become the most listened to song by any musician ever on that app. Awakenings can go viral. But why am I sharing this story, which is not really about our food system, it's not about our seventh principle. It could be because I've spent the last few years binge watching music videos by a Korean pop band and I just don't have any other cultural references to draw upon. That's not untrue. But it's also because I know effective church when I see it. And that was effective church. And so if a boy band can awaken in people the idea of our first principle, then maybe it's not so far-fetched to think that through storytelling, through music, through building community, we can also awaken in people the idea of our seventh principle. And so that brings me around to the second story, and this is my own personal testimony. Yes, I'm going to testify, another word that I know is complicated in our heritage. I'm going to testify about my own conversion that has led me to change how I eat, how I live, and how I've spent my career. So today, unsurprisingly, considering my job title, I identify as a vegan. But during my teens and my 20s, this was something I only did when I was alone. And even then, with a lot of exceptions. You know, most people would say that if you're not vegan all the time, it doesn't count as being vegan at all. And I basically agree with that. But I did make a lot of choices starting from a young age about what to eat based on ethics. When I was a teenager, I learned about factory farming from my friends. These were friends who had pamphlets and went to protests. And so I knew intellectually that this was a system I shouldn't support with my dollars. And therefore, I avoided animal products when it was convenient. However, my values for eating ethically clashed with another value that I held strongly, and that was probably deeper. And this was my value of making other people feel comfortable. And that's why for most of my life, I kept my ethical eating on the down low. Most of my friends and even my parents didn't think of me as a vegetarian or vegan. When I was with others, I was easygoing, and it made me proud to think of myself as an easygoing person. But I don't want to downplay the impact of the choices that I made in what to eat. All of those choices added up over time to a considerable amount of money that I was not giving to factory farms. And I do think that if everyone in industrialized countries like the US took a similar approach to food choices, our food system would be considerably more just and equitable and ethical than it is today. And that matters. I would never criticize another person for doing something that helps them eat more ethically. But from a personal standpoint, fighting factory farming was not my priority. There were other issues that I devoted more thought and energy to, that I had stronger emotional ties to. The idea of eating products from factory farms, it really only bothered me in the abstract. You know, it was an issue amongst many. What eventually opened my heart to this issue, what made me not only think but feel that I really couldn't participate in this part of our food system, actually had more to do with my feelings about being a woman. You see, the social justice issue that's always felt the most personal and real for me has been that of sexual exploitation. This has never felt abstract or intellectual the way that the suffering of a chicken on a farm may have seemed abstract or distant. Like most women, once you get them to open up about it, I have experienced sexual violence. The women closest to me in my life have experienced it. And my values and my life choices have been profoundly shaped by the fear and complicated feelings I have about my female body and my female identity. And I know, just based on numbers, that I am not alone in this room to have been shaped in that way. About a year after I started working for Farm Forward, I got into a conversation with my partner about the history of animal husbandry. That's a term that means the breeding of animals. And it dawned on me that the practice that we have of controlling the sexuality of cows and goats and pigs, of forcing them to mate and give birth in order to serve the interests of their owners, rather than fulfilling their own inherent impulses, it dawned on me that this was the same. That it was the same practice of sexual control that's been imposed by men and male-dominated cultures on my own female ancestors, going all the way back to the dawn of agriculture. And something welled up in me with that realization that hadn't been there before. And while it wasn't really a verbal realization, I guess what I would describe it as was a great no. No, I'm not someone who participates in that. The person I am, a person who abhors sexual exploitation, cannot do that to other beings. I can't do that and still have integrity. I can't do that and still be whole. And from that moment, it was like a switch was flipped. For me, the question of what I should eat stopped being a moral calculation. It wasn't something I thought about in utilitarian terms. What's going to do the most good? What's going to have the most impact? It just stopped being a choice. And I also couldn't be a secret vegan anymore. Because it was no longer about what I chose to eat. Instead, it was about who I am. And I don't want to be someone who hides who I am from those who I care about. Pretty much every person I've met who's made this kind of lifestyle choice, or who's chosen to work in activism to end factory farming, has a story of an awakening that led to their conversion. They're not all the same story as mine. They have different details. But every single person who has told me that story has emphasized how emotionally profound it was. And almost every single person has told me that this experience was spiritual. And what makes sense to me that this is not just a moral calculation. It makes sense to me that when people make this shift, they experience it as a spiritual change. Because while our ethical choices as consumers on a meal-by-meal basis, on a purchase-by-purchase basis, may not seem like a big deal, rejecting the idea of human dominance, the idea of human exceptionalism, the idea of our individual separateness from others is in fact deeply countercultural. This is not something we can easily change just by learning new facts or by enacting new policies. But we can create transformations of the heart. And these kinds of transformations do take place. Awakenings happen all the time to people all over the world. And speaking from experience, having gone through a conversion in at least one aspect of my life that changed at least one way of how I live, which is my relationship to food and animals, the idea that more and more people can awaken to their independence, can awaken to their interconnectedness, and the idea that these awakenings can transform how lots of people live with other animals, and with the planet. Now that idea doesn't seem so far-fetched to me anymore. So thank you. And I now invite everybody to join in our next hymn, Wake Now My Senses.
Please stand if you are able.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason in musical blue. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limits and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend. Burden to celebrate their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience, with justice thy guide. Joy with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted the privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Rise thy pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Earth, you're a planet transformed by our care. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Rise thy pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Earth, you're a planet transformed by our care. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Rise thy pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Earth, you're a planet transformed by our care.
Yes, please be seated. Okay. So it's offering time. And if Summit is a valued community in your life, please support us by making an offering today. Our Zoomers are invited to contribute to our virtual plate. The link can be found in the chat box. And as always, we acknowledge our committed pledgers. They help us keep our doors open. And now we will gratefully accept your generous donations during the musical interlude.
I will be playing a berceuse, a lullaby by a Polish pianist, composer, harpsichordist, and musicologist Wanda Landowska.
Thank you, Barbara. And now Jennifer will read the chalice extinguishing words, and we will see if I can extinguish the chalice.
Help us to be the always hopeful gardeners of the Spirit, who know that without darkness, nothing comes to birth, as without light, nothing flowers.
Now stand if you're able for a closing circle song, and after that, we'll have announcements.
Fellowship we stand before we go to share our goals hand in hand. Together hand in hand, in fellowship we stand. Through laughter, tears, through hopes and fears, together we shall stand.
I don't know if any of you have announcements, but waiting to see if anyone is popping up. Yeah. Did anyone have an announcement this morning? Al, okay. You can stay there, Al. I'll hand you the mic, okay?
Bit better. Okay,
Okay.
sure. Not a problem.
He's trying to upstage Mary.
Yeah.
Better also.
Well, you're definitely faster.
Okay, yeah, I'm pretty good. Okay.
We're still recording. We'll stop recording after the announcements.
All right, so, good morning, so, and thank you, Jennifer, for the interesting talk about interdependence and conversion. A nasty word in UU circles, yes, but okay. Well, yes, I'm just up here to remind you people of the, that we're still signing people up for the interfaith shelter on the first 2 weeks in April, and we have the sign-up tables outside in the greeting area, and then also later on during the coffee, we'll have the sign-up tables or sheets over in the salon, and during the week, you have the sign-up sheets are in the office also, and you go in the volunteers desk, and so with a lot of opportunity to sign up and going, and so and if someone can't sign up in person, they can call or text or email me or Liz McHugh. Yes, Liz, stand up please, Liz, so we know who you are. So, okay, thank you. Yes, all right. And so, right. So we're looking forward to having a good shelter, getting a lot of support, but we did a lot more. So, right. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other announcements this morning? Oh, all right, let's dance.
Hey. Well, that's okay with me, but Larry might be upset.
So I'm taking it that we have no more announcements, correct? Okay, then. So, a couple of minutes and we'll take questions.